Hello everyone, I'm of course a Black Shadow and welcome to this special and somewhat unexpected video for Let's Play Resident Evil Remake 2. I figured after the end of the last video, and now having had a couple of days, personally speaking, since I recorded that, I've had some time to kind of gather my thoughts on the game a little bit more, and I've had some rather interesting comments and questions about the game since the series ended. So I figured I'd spend some time here and record this video, much like we did at the start of the series, addressing comments and feedback and various bits and pieces that people have pointed about the game, just to give my thoughts about that, to give a more complete view, I suppose, of my view on Resident Evil 2 Remake, or Resident Evil Remake 2, whichever the hell one it is. Now, the first thing that has to be addressed, there is a giant elephant in the room, and that is referring to your friend and mine, Mr. Wayne Lee, who I besmirched his reputation, we'll go with that. It was pointed out by a good couple of folks about the fact that I completely misread the generated email from the Umbrella Labs in the Nest regarding the report about his use of the chemicals on Plant 43. Now, of course, this is one of those situations where it kind of shows off the fact that I'm playing a game blind, and it was one of those cases where I'm literally seeing it for the first time there, then, in the moment, while being pursued by a tyrant. And there's people that are watching it. Obviously, the game had been out by about 2 weeks by that point. So those are the people that have been playing through the game a few times, delved into information about the game. And, it's one of those ones where it kind of shows that up. So, as these two pictures here show you, the email regarding this is way later than when Wayne Lee went into the restroom, and as was rightly pointed out, it's actually referring to the fact that we used our own herbicide on Plant 43, and of course, we still had Wayne Lee's wristband on him. So, yeah. Sorry about that, but, well, I was kind of preoccupied, but thanks for pointing that out nonetheless. So now to actual proper questions and comments about this game. Oh my goodness, that was, when I realized that and someone commented, I read them back, I was like, oh my god. So, first thing, let's actually start with Plant 43, and the reason why it is actually called Plant 43, I should say. I'll read this comment here from Jimmy D'Souza regarding the fact that he thinks that the name for it is a little bit on the silly side. Now, obviously, this name is a referral back to the original Plant 42 from the Arc Labs incident in 1998/1996, was when the game was actually made. And obviously, this is a reference to that, in that it's a case of a giant, overgrown, plant monster, effectively, centered around a specific area, much like the original game, and that. Now, there is a bit of a question in regards to, would the Umbrella staff actually know about Plant 43? Or Plant 42, I should say, and so they could actually call this Plant 43, because, of course, there's no reason to call this Plant 43. The game never really particularly addresses this. I think it's one of those cases, and you'll see this come up in a few times over the course of both the series, the game, and a couple of times in these comments, of sort of slight lore changes / additions which have been made to this game. And I'll talk about that whole concept of lore and canon in a short bit. I got no problems with them calling it Plant 43. It's kind of it's like this game kind of does. The fact it's a remake of a game from 20 years ago, it's almost compelled to try and make throwbacks to 20 years ago, if you know what I mean. So this is one of those ways of doing it. I got no two problems about that. Would it necessarily know? I don't 100% sure. They did cut off communication in Arco Lab when shit went down, but I'm sure one of the first things they likely would have reported, and I think one of the first things that started occurring was the growth of this plant being Plant 42. So I think it's quite impossible that some of the folks in the labs in the Nest underground the city probably knew something about what was going on in the Arco Labs, but were probably sworn to secrecy, something along those lines. I got no problems with it. Next question from Savant regarding, is it the GLT virus that is spread in Raccoon City? Now, first of all, it is the T virus that is spread out. The reason behind this is that the T virus its main sort of selling point, if you will, because obviously all these viruses are getting developed, and then people try to sell them on to militaries and whatever else. The T virus is highly sort of transmittable. We'll go with that, as obviously seen in Raccoon City. Anything that gets infected with it, its main thought process is to do things to continue to spread said virus in whatever means it deems necessary. Whereas the G virus was something that was specifically created by William Birkin. And is not quite the same. You have to kind of go digging deep into the lore, and I'm sure there's like in the books and films and whatever else, there's more details we had here and there. But basically, the G virus isn't quite the same. It's not as transmittable as that. It's a specifically sort of effectively a genetically engineered virus. Although I suppose you could say the T virus is exactly the same thing, but you get the idea. And it's kind of funny as well, because it actually brings up something that I always remember from the 1998 game as well, and that is regarding the fact that the game never makes it particularly clear if it's the G or T virus, because the case has both of them in it, which kind of makes sense. It's William Burke, and he has access to both of them. If he's going to be attempting to run and secure his research, he's going to want to secure probably samples of both viruses, and ultimately the T virus samples get shattered. The rats get to them. They start consuming them. And, of course, rats being rats, they then spread it to pretty much everywhere you can damn well think of. Whereas the G virus manages to somehow not break, and Birkin, considering that he's been shot several times, is on the point of death, and probably full of retribution and rage, instead decides to inject itself in him to, well, depends where you want to look at it. Revenge, death, slaughter, and I suppose perhaps part of him to prove that his research actually was a success, which I guess you could argue it probably was, for better or worse. More lore interesting things. Now, this is where it starts getting this whole concept of, I'm going to get into in a moment. This one, again, of Sons of Fun, is regarding the fact of, in the Leon B game, or the Leon games it turns out, Ada at the end, after getting shot by a net, drops from Leon's hands. Now, this is something that is not new. If you remember back to 1998, the Leon A game had basically this exact same scene, where she somehow falls to the dark depths, some indeterminable but a decidedly large amount of distance, and yet manages to survive reasonably well. And there have been a few people that have suggested, did she have a grappling hook from Resident Evil 4? Now, I can't say I'm an expert on this situation. However, I'm going to do the probably dangerous thing here and put on my Ada Wong hat at the moment, or maybe Ada Wong cocktail dress, as it might be. Now, I've been telling to Leon, and I've effectively been lying to him this whole time, saying that I'm either, an FBI agent, or I'm a researcher's girlfriend, or whatever kind of crazy story I've got there. Now, I've already pointed my gun at him. The ruse is up. The game is over in that respect. And I've just been shot, and I'm currently dangling to my death and holding on with one hand. And I have no prospect of being pulled up for whatever reason. Now, if I have a grappling hook somewhere on my person A, I'm not going to sit and wait for Leon to lose the hold of me, for me to fall down into the depths, into the darkness, I don't know where the bottom is, and wait to be out of sight before I fire said grappling hook. I'm just going to fire that somewhere, get to safety, and say, I'm coming for you next time, and then run off and get the hell out of the station. So there is a bit of a plot hole in that respect as to how the fuck she survives. I know this is Resident Evil. I know this is Capcom. I know the laws of physics is sometimes totally ignored for the purposes of the game, but these things do happen. So I'm pretty sure she doesn't. However, this does address a much bigger thing that I have realized about this game. And I had to confirm this. I watched some of Pistol Pete, friend of the channel, Pistol Pete, and I watched his playthrough, some bits of it from his game. He did the alternate route of doing Leon A and Claire B, the alternate to what we did. Now, there's two fundamental things that need discussing here. The first one I'm going to touch upon is the concept of A and B games in this remake. So, A and B games. Now, I had to do a bit of research for this one, just to kind of confirm my slight suspicions here. Part of that was watching Pistol Pete, friend of the channel, Pistol Pete. He did a playthrough of this game as well, although he went the alternate route of doing the Leon A, Claire B way, which I did the other one. And it was very interesting watching bits of that series, and in particular watching kind of the end sequences of that series. And it's become apparent to me that there, as far as a and B scenario in this game, they're nowhere near as distinctive as they were. We need to go back 20 years for this, like a lot of things we have to do when discussing this game. Now, the differences between a Leon A and a Leon B, as well as like a Leon A to a Claire A, and I suppose as well a Claire A to a Claire B, are all very distinctive. There are quite a few differences in how they all run, and that's really cool. It kind of gives you an impression, like when you play through, say, like we'll take the canonic route, for example, or canonic in apostrophes. I'm sure I'll get some slack for that, which is Claire A, Leon B. Now, in 1998, what you do in the Claire A run does have effective knock-on implications for Leon B, or at least that's kind of how it works. You know, there are actions that are taken by Claire, for example, say Chief Irons' office, really good example. In Leon's, both of his games, you never get access to the office because Leon never touches the helicopter. So, and he just doesn't do that. He doesn't get the explosives. He never tries to get access to it. But when you do Claire's A game, for example, and you do blow the route out of the you blow the helicopter wreckage out of the way to get access to his office. As Leon B, you eventually get told about that, and on the radio he said, "Hey, I've knocked the wreckage out of the way. You should probably go explore it. The chief's a crazy man." You know, that sort of malarkey. The same is true the other way around regarding the kennels and getting access towards Ben's cells when you play as Claire. Again, you don't get access to that unless it's Leon A. The whole idea being that the events of the B game are effectively ever so slightly behind the events of the A game. Hence why the A person is the first to get to the cell, to get to the station. They're meant to be the first that gets to the sewers. You know, that whole design. Now, the point I'm trying to make here, as I get horribly off topic, as I sometimes do, is that these sort of knock-on implications and the differences in the games and the way they play are nowhere near as marked as in Remake 2. And that is very obvious, just from comparing someone's A game to their B game respective, or the second run. Outside of the fact that they enter the station from the from the fire escape, so the front door, outside the fact that the way the police station, you have to kind of run through it, is different, therefore because of it, because your entry point is different, and the fact that whoever does the B game has to take on the Birkin fight in the train, outside of that, personally, there are not that many differences as far as I'm concerned. There are a lot of gameplay differences that are marked between an A game and a B game. The second handgun, as I said, the route you have to take through the police station, for example, is different. But from a sort of overall story point of view, there isn't that much difference. I mean, to be fair, there isn't even that much difference between, say, Leon's game and Claire's game, which surprised me a lot. Especially when, again, you think 20 years ago, I'd say Claire's A game and Leon's B game are incredibly different. They sort of take differing routes through most of the maps. They fight different bosses. Of course, weapons are different as well. And the whole way it's managed is very, very different to the remake. So I don't know if that's a negative about this game. I can't really sit here and say it's a positive, because having those sort of distinct identities for the scenarios, it can only be a good thing, and it kind of gives you that feeling of diversity. It gives you that feeling of, of interaction as well between characters, between an A and a B game, even if perhaps there's more indirect consequences that are resulting, which gives you that impression of interaction and relevance between the two scenarios. Whereas you think back to Leon, R1 and Remake, at what points did Claire and Leon actually interact with each other once they got to the police station? They ran into each other at the fire escape. And then they ran into each other in the Umbrella Labs. And whoever played the B game read a couple of notes that the A person left. That's about it. Which is, I think, a little disappointing. I think, especially as there was quite a lot of concerted effort of kind of meeting up and just hearing little things here and there from your partner and being in contact. That didn't happen all that much in the Remake 2, which is something I didn't quite realise, but again, having had a couple of days to kind of reflect on my thoughts and feelings about the game, is something that I have realised, and I think that's a slight negative. I'm not going to accuse the game heavily there, but it's something that I think is worth noting, and it is interesting that it was pointed out. And thinking about it, I think it is true. It's something they could have done perhaps a little bit more of it. The potential for that is there, especially in 2019. You can do all sorts of crazy shit. So I think the potential for it was there, and perhaps that could have been capitalized much more on. Right, what's next then? Let's see. We'll do this one next from Jimmy D'Souza regarding subplots. Yes, and this is something I totally forgot about in the original game. It is something that does exist. It is hinted at and suggested in some files in the original game about one of the subplots in the game, 1998, that Chief Irons basically sabotaged his own police station because he kind of realised what the hell was going on and didn't want anyone to escape Raccoon City. And obviously he thought, well, we've got a police station here. It's full of people with guns. They might do not a bad job. They're kind of trained at this sort of situation-ish. So I'm going to scatter ammo around, I'm going to lock doors, I'm going to make their lives miserable, make sure they die. Now that certainly doesn't really exist in this game. It is one of a few subplots of the original that don't really appear in this game. I don't necessarily mind that as such, although it does bring up this pothole of how could a police station that, didn't necessarily have that many issues if you compare it to 1998, and yet they were still overwhelmed by the zombie apocalypse when a rookie police officer and a biker girl, effectively, and a / college student, were able to do reasonably fine and get through much, much nastier things. I can't answer you. It is a bit of a plot hole. Video games always do, though, so I'm not going to pick on this game and say, oh, this makes no sense, because every game's got plot holes and little things that actually don't quite add up in the grand scheme of things. Though it is notable to say that whole subplot and that subtext totally doesn't exist in the remake. I didn't see any files suggesting such a thing. Never occurred, so interesting you point that one out. Alright, so a next comment I want to address is from Just Some Gamer, who commented regarding game balance between Leon scenarios and Claire scenarios as far as their weapon balance. Now, this is something that I did find very strange over the course of this series. Having played the original in 1998 plenty of times, I think it's a fair statement to suggest that Leon's weaponry in the original is, I think, on the whole, stronger than Claire's, and that's because of Claire's very unorthodox weapons, especially with like the bow gun and the grenade launcher, compared to just good old-fashioned shotguns and magnums. Whereas in this remake, I think on the whole, it's fair to say that Claire has stronger weaponry than Leon. And it's not so much that I think Claire's weaponry is not bad and it's reasonably versatile. The grenade launcher as well is incredibly powerful and very, very versatile. Whereas for Leon's concerned, the shotgun, for example, outside of trying to headshot zombies, I don't think the shotgun is that amazing a weapon. As we proved, like against Lickers are just a real exclamation point on the fact that I think Claire's weaponry is ultimately stronger than Leon's, which is really strange. Claire can just grenade launcher them and stun them, be it with acid rounds or flame rounds, and kill them pretty easily, whereas Leon's weaponry doesn't really stun it, as we explored at points in the series, using both the shotgun as well as a modified Magnum. And unless the liquor was like hanging upside down on a roof, it didn't really seem to give a shit. And it was like, okay, then thank you very much. May I have another? Which is kind of weird, especially when you think in kind of like Resident Evil lore. Magnums are kind of generally the be-all and end-all of most conversations outside of rocket launchers. So it does certainly make them feel like they're quite weak compared to things like, say, like the grenade launcher, like, say, the SMG, which I actually don't think was too bad a weapon overall. Now, admittedly, Leon does have the flamethrower, which I think is a really, really strong weapon. Against the plant monsters, it's been pretty good, and we even got to use it against some zombies here and there. I kind of wish I'd had an opportunity to use it against some lickers as well, but that never actually arose. I was kind of scared to see what the result was going to be. But I think it's fair to say Claire does have better weaponry overall. Although to suggest that Leon only has the firepower to deal with like some enemies where Claire doesn't, I don't think I can agree with that. I can't think of any enemy in the game which Leon deals with notably better than Claire does. The plant zombies, yeah, obviously the flamethrower is specifically tailor-made for them. But as we showed, the flame rounds for the grenade launcher are more than capable of dealing with them. And even playing the game for the first time ever on hardcore, we got to the Umbrella Labs with a fairly ample supply of flame rounds. So I don't think I can really say that is a thing. But I will certainly agree. I think Claire's weaponry is markedly improved on Leon's, which is weird, but you know, that's how it goes sometimes. Next up, Terminator 1337 Cool Dude. A few things that he pointed out that he wasn't particularly happy about the game. I'll have a quick look at these. So, safe rooms. Now, safe rooms and the concept of a safe room is obviously very difficult to do in Remake 2 because of the way that there are no loading sequences. And ultimately, you know, if you kind of walk into a room through a door, it kind of acts a bit like the original in that rooms are kind of their own sort of little environments and ecosystems. Now, there are certainly some areas where zombies can indeed bust through doors and other enemies and come through them and pursue you. But safe rooms are like their own instances. And as we showed various occasions, especially with the Tyrant, for example, you could be being chased by a Tyrant, walk into a safe room, and he just doesn't. He just stops and walks away. It is kind of immersion breaking, and it is weird. I think it's a difficult one because the game does have a system in place, as we showed, for example, like in the main hallway. Now, you can't save the game if there are enemies nearby the typewriter. And you know what? And that's fine. I think that makes totally logical sense because it doesn't make sense. Although, very weirdly, you can still access item boxes when there's a zombie next to you, but you can't actually save the game, which is a bit strange in itself. And secondly, it brings up this question that I asked to you guys. Would this game be better if, quote, safe rooms weren't safe anymore, and that if, I suppose, not that say that zombies could just like randomly walk into them and explore into them, but if you're getting pursued by an enemy, that they can pursue you into that safe room? Would that make the game better? Would it make it more realistic? I think it'd be very interesting to play it and try it out. I think, again, it is very bizarre, especially like the Tyrant, for example, that we had a situation in the main hallway, actually, and you had the secret room underneath the fountain where we were being pursued by the Tyrant, and I literally walked down the stairs, and he just walked away. That was it. He could still see me, for goodness sakes, and he just started walking away, and I was just going backwards and forwards, and it was very, very strange. So I think it's a game choice that they made to kind of make things a bit more simplistic, I suppose, for the gamer. But I would not be adverse if there was a maybe somewhere in the game files, for example, like if you're playing the PC version, where you could edit it so enemies can follow you into safe rooms. Because the system is in place for you to prevent you from doing certain things if zombies are next to them and nearby them, but it's outside of the main hallway. It's never a thing, because I think the main hallway is about the only area where there's a safe room-ish area, like the typewriter and item box, where enemies can come anywhere near you. So it's nice that that feature exists, but they don't really ever make any use out of it, which is kind of strange. Alien's device, there is a bit of a plot hole, admittedly, that she's able to use the device to hack all these sort of things that she does in the sewers. Why doesn't she just use that on the parking garage meter? It's a good question. I have no answers to that. That is a plot hole. Unless someone in the chat can in the comments can explain that, I'd be very much interested. But I don't see a particular reason why she couldn't have done that. I mean, you could argue, yes, maybe she couldn't do it with Leon right next to her, but she could have just come back later and done it, right? I don't know. And next up, yes, Lickers. Wandering around the whole police station. And again, I guess this again comes back to my first point regarding enemies having more of an overwhelming, overall being able to kind of chase you into places. It is done, but it's not done heavily. Maybe the developers thought that if they just had let monsters have just total free reign of the police station, that you could just start getting swamped by enemies, especially if you're trying to avoid combat. The fact that enemies are kind of segmented-ish into their own areas allows that to be a lot easier. Maybe they just felt the game would just be too difficult if they let zombies and monsters, a lot more free roaming. I'm pretty sure that when they were developing this game, that's something they would have experimented with and played around with, and maybe they just got to game testing and enemies had much more free reign, and they just found that the response was, this is really fucking hard, and not necessarily quite enjoyable. So I suspect that's what it's about. But again, that comes back to the first point. But I wouldn't be against it. It'd be fun for a condition one, right? Right, so next up is Brandon Wells, who brings up a point that has been talked about a few times over the course of this gaming series, and that is regarding the game's soundtrack design. Now, obviously, as I've mentioned before, the way that this game attempts to approach that is very, 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 very different to the original, which is partly due to limitations, I think, of hardware and that sort of whole area discussion, which I'm not even going to remotely get into here. But the Remake 2 does make a profound choice of, rather than using overarching sounds and music tracks and whatever else to convey emotions, be it like urgency in the Umbrella Labs when the self-destruct sequence is going, or say more sort of desolateness in, say, the Dead Factory, for example, and kind of the eeriness of it, of like, where the hell are you? This game instead chooses a lot of ambient sounds, a lot of only using sounds when it kind of is necessary to, like, say, hey, shit's going on, you're being attacked by a boss, or there's monsters around you. We'll kick in some sound for effect. And it's very, I don't know if modern's necessarily the right way to describe it. That may or may not be correct. But I think it's worth a point of making mention of. I don't think I can criticize the game. It's just simply, those are the two ways of doing it, and they opted for choice B instead of choice A. Clearly, those tracks from the original are classic. They are very, very, very cool. And Resident Evil itself has a history of having those really cool soundtracks, be it in like the original game from 1996, all the way to, say, to like, Code Veronica and RE Outbreak in the mid-2000s. That was just the way of classic survival horror. That was how they kind of ran it. Whereas this game isn't, I wouldn't say classic survival horror. It's kind of a weird amalgamation of a few different genres into one, which I think ultimately they did very well, personally speaking. But that amalgamation came with it that they figured they would take the approach of, not walking through the police station and having music out of nowhere. They trying to be a more real feeling experience. Now, the best way that I'll ever be able to explore this is when I go eventually and I look to do the Leon A, Claire B runs. I don't know quite when those will be. However, I have said and I have made a decision that when I do those runs, I'm going to be running those with the original soundtracks, which you can purchase for the game. It's like $2-3 or something like that. And I know a few people that I've seen who are actually using that. And it basically incorporates the old music into the game. It's specifically done for it, and it's kind of modified a little bit. And whenever I go and do that run, I'll be able to know properly whether I think it was better doing it with the original style or to this style. But I've got nothing against. I've got nothing against it at the moment. I think the way they've done it is pretty cool. I like it. It's again, it brings that more realistic feel to it. So we'll see that in the future. So, a Twitter question that I actually received from Dread Pirate Rob regarding the nostalgia value of the original versus the remake, and which do I personally prefer. I'll get to the second part of this comment in a moment, but the first things first, so the nostalgia value of the original. It was, obviously, it's difficult for me because Resident Evil 2 in 1998 is still one of my favorite games of all time, and that will probably never change. And it's always nice, it's like when I did the Origin of Species runs, I've done like the knife runs, and being able to go back into that and kind of the feel of that game is always great for me. Now, the nostalgia of this game was certainly been kind of used and kind of not with the remake. As I've said, Capcom decided to take a very blank sort of slate approach with Remake 2. For better or worse, that is totally up to you guys. There'll be people that will argue both ways about this. I think it's unfair to compare properly, say, this game's nostalgia feeling to the original, because there are a lot of differences in remarks of that. Outside of the general settings and the general characters and the general plot of the remake, there isn't that much else to compare between this and the original because, they're video games and they're over 20 years apart. So there's only so much that can be similar without, infringing upon, a modern, how video gaming is viewed today compared to how it was viewed 20 years ago and the expectations of that. So as far as the nostalgia value is concerned, I don't think you can ever really surpass the nostalgia of an original title because that's where it comes from. It's like something I watch, for example. This is probably a really ham-fisted way of trying to explain this, but like professional wrestling, for example, is something that I do watch sometimes and I do enjoy. And it's always kind of cool in amongst the modern day, especially with like certain events where you suddenly you get someone that appears that you relate to and is identifiable with a period from the past. And it's always kind of cool because you have that whole nostalgia. You look at it and you look at it and you kind of have those memories of them from the past and stuff that they did, and you think, yeah, that's really cool. And there were certainly instances myself of playing through the Remake 2 and kind of seeing things and thinking, oh yeah, that was pretty nice. I remember back in the original game when I, had incidents in this sort of similar area. And there are certain areas and rooms that are much more relatable to the original than others. I think probably one of the most, it's like when you first walk into the police station through the front door and you just get that glimpse of the giant hallway, that is one of the most nostalgic bits of the game, I think, because it's the amount of games where you've done that, in Resident Evil 2, in Resident Evil 3, in Resident Evil Outbreak. You even get to do that in like the rail shooter games for the Wii. It is just one of those iconic, classic survival horror sights of walking through the front doors and just this giant hallway which used to belong, as it used to be an art gallery, and you just walk into it and you're just like, holy shit, this place is huge and looks amazing. And I think certainly at times, getting back to the point, Remake 2, there were instances where they did that very well, and they gave it a nice sort of update and touch-up for 2019, but they were few and far between, as it was very clear that they decided not to go too heavily into the nostalgia. There are references, like with Brad on posters and the general layout, but it wasn't quite as much as I figured there would be. So which do I prefer? The original. I don't think you can ever really beat the original. So bringing up the second point of this comment from Dread Pirate, as well as a few other people, including Savant here. How many years until the Resident Evil 2 Remake knife run? Now, I am well aware of the fact that you can unlock an item for this game, which is a unbreakable knife, a knife that has no durability issues, although you can certainly still lose it to an enemy, like in a self-defense use. Now, first of all, you would basically be forced to need to get that to make doing a knife run even remotely possible. I think without that, it just wouldn't work. The fact that knives have a lot of durability and have their durability, which isn't that huge either, would almost kind of force it from a knife run to a basically never get hit run, which you're not realistically going to do that easily. Like I say, in the Savant's comment from Crimson Scarecrow, a hardcore no-heal run is basically a go for the room and go for the game and never really be physically attacked apart from a few times if you've got a knife on you. And you know, we've touched upon these sort of game styles before, and they can be very, very hit and miss. As regards to actually doing a knife run, though, for Resident Evil 2 Remake, I would be foolish to sit here and say it wouldn't happen, because it probably will happen at some point. Although it's not the first knife run I have looking up. I'll be honest with you guys, whenever I do the next knife run of a Resident Evil game, that is most likely going to be Code Veronica X, as when I get ready to do these knife runs, I do have to kind of gear myself up for them. I have to plan them a little bit, think ahead, think, right, what the fuck am I going to do? And Code Veronica X is the one that I've kind of done the most planning for, but not actually got around to doing yet. And Code Veronica X as well is a lot of fun. It's a great game, really enjoyable, and I'll be very looking forward to getting back onto that game at some point. So, it will happen some point. I'm sure I'll find a situation where I'll try and knife run this game, and I'll immediately hate that I figured that was a good idea. But it will probably be, Code Veronica X first at some point in the future. We'll have to see. Right then, so I think that brings it into, that's about all the comments that I sort of pointed out I figured I wanted to kind of bring up in this video. So thank you very much for listening to this. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And a huge thanks to everyone that has been commenting throughout the series. As I've said last time, it has made this LP a lot more enjoyable, and being able to feed back to you guys and kind of relate in that has been fantastic. By the time this video comes out, the Ghost Survivors DLC for this game will probably be on the verge of coming out, so I will be sitting down onto that tomorrow, and I'll be eventually getting a chance to delve into that, and hopefully the first footage of that DLC will be up late tomorrow night. It might not be until early Saturday. It kind of depends on how recording goes. I'll let you guys know about that. But regardless, we say we'll be doing the Ghost Survivors stuff. We've got Tofu and Hunk runs, which I have not yet recorded. They're going to be fun. And then we'll be taking a short break on the game to do some bits and pieces. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the Ghost Survivors DLC. Free DLC for a game in 2019. What has the world come to? I know, right? So thank you very much for all your comments and feedback, and I will see you all hopefully tomorrow for the Ghost Survivors.